Good evening, everyone. Welcome to another wonderful event with the Virtual Tasting Society. I'm Jane Kilkenny. I can't even say my own name tonight. I'm Jane Kilkenny. I'm subbing for Vadim Perlovsky. We are here tonight with Robin Coupar and the Isle of Harris, the Hearach, and some really fantastic drams. See, I need to drink. That's the whole problem. Anyway, Robin, welcome. Thanks for joining us again. Please introduce yourself. Take it away.
Jane, fantastic for that wonderful introduction. And now's your opportunity to have a dram. Good evening, everybody. Thrilled to that you're joining this tasting. It should be quite a unique tasting, very educational. One hopes. And what I think what you're going to get out of it is a real appreciation for that, the latest wave in distilleries that have opened up in Scotland in the last, let's call it 30 years, these last, glorious 30 years. So, but a little bit about myself. We may have connected, either in person or via social media, or maybe at an event. But I've been in the US now for since 2003, and I came over the Glenmorangie in Ardbeg as the brand ambassador. Previously, I had done a stint selling a lot of blended Scotch in Latin America, which was opportunistic, risky, but a lot of fun, I have to say. Of all places I went to most was Caracas in Venezuela. And so, I hope all my friends down there are good in these interesting times we live in. But anyway, so after that, I joined Campari and I worked on Russell's Reserve and then on some of the other brands in the portfolio, including Glenrothes, Bowmore, Auchentoshan, and then latterly Glen Grant from up in Speyside. But for almost the last 2 years, I switched allegiance to represent the Isle of Harris Distillery right up here on the Isle of Harris. So this island here is right up in the Atlantic. It's part of the Outer Hebrides. It's about 350 miles north of Islay down here. Right at the bottom, you'll see the north coast of Ireland. But it's equally about 350 miles west of Speyside, which is, I would say, the biggest whiskey production region on the planet. But after the island of Britain and the island of Ireland, and that would include Northern Ireland and the Republic, the third biggest island, and this will blow your mind, is this island here, which is Lewis and Harris. Okay, it's really one island, but it's always been known as two isles. There is a channel of water that separates both islands, but more importantly, there's a big mountain range. So back in olden times, there'd be two separate clans that would, rule each kingdom. But it's the third biggest island, in the British Isles, which is unbelievable. Okay, so we're going to start with the Harris Gin. So this is a path that's been, well trodden over recent times, aspirational or distilleries that, are startup distilleries with a vision to make a malt whiskey or a bourbon will, at some point, between the start of production and maturity, bottling and getting the product out into market will need revenue to come into the company. So we launched the Isle of Harris gin. So I'm going to take a little pour here.
The bottle is gorgeous.
Well, I'm glad you mentioned that, Jane, because the bottle, basically, I mean, being on an island out in the Atlantic, one thing is that Harris has probably got, and many of the Western Isles in Scotland are very unique places. I mean, it's where, Columba came in from Ireland, introducing, Christianity. Of course, St. Ninian had come in through the Orkney Islands, which, way far north. I mean, up Orkney Islands are up here. But, these are known as the Inner Hebrides here. So you've got distilled Arran, Islay, Jura, Mull, Skye here, Assay. These are, it says my internet connection is unstable. Am I back? Anyway, so these are the Inner Hebrides, and these are the Outer Hebrides. So there's a whole string of islands, and Gaelic speaking. Now, Harris is a population of around about 2,000 people. So very, very small. But if you look closely in the bottle here, you'll see that on the label it says infused with sugar kelp. Kelp is foraged. It's called Atlantic kelp. It's known as sugar kelp because it has quite a sweet taste. In fact, if you've ever been to a Japanese restaurant, which all of you undoubtedly have, it's known as miso soup, or miso soup. This is the key ingredient of miso soup. So this is our diver, Lewis Mackenzie, who Sean Connery's younger brother. Sometimes he's jokingly referred to as no relation. But he's a diver. He forages the kelp. So you can't go in and just hack it up. You can't over harvest it. So you have to treat this very, very carefully. And also, during the process of making the gin, it's handled with very strict safety laws. But key cork stopper sound. You've got these ridges here, which are, these are not waves, but ripples of water that will roll up to these beautiful white sandy beaches. And if you Google Isle of Harris and you tap on images, you will see these incredible azure colors, long, when the tide goes out, dogs just go absolutely nuts, running down the beach. So, but back to the gin, you've got, quite a, you get obviously juniper because, or gin, you have to be, to be a gin, you have to be, juniper has to be one of your botanicals or your lead botanical. But sugar kelp gives it this slightly maritime kombu, they call it in Japanese. I was speaking to an islander who lives here in the Bay Area, who told me that when they were boys, youngsters, they would pick kelp up and eat it off the beach. And it would often be, used as a fertilizer, in fact. And the peat, a lot of the island peat, will have this, 10,000 years of decay as it's been sort of pushed down into the soil. Million years later, it will become coal. What do you think?
I love this. I'm not a huge gin fan, but
Right.
that slight salinity, the kombu note that you mentioned, the lemon that comes off the top of it,
Yeah.
is is this like an Old Tom style gin?
Well, just to geek out a little bit, you know, gin. The cocktail recipe for gin is probably much thicker than you think. I mean, you know, the base of many cocktails is gin. I mean, the gin and tonic, I think was one of the finest, aperitifs. I mean, having worked for Campari and Aperol Spritz, they seem to have a monopoly on the aperitif. But I mean, I would say that the gin and tonic, goes back, you know, century plus, maybe more. I mean, back to the in India, and when British were there, during the empire. But the gin martini is an American cocktail. You've got the Negroni, which is an ode to, well, my former company pushed that very, very hard, Negroni week. But gin is the basis. But gin can be like whiskey, I think, in a sense that, you know, for us, it's the kelp is something that is excessive. It's part of our island community. So and also the packaging is very. I think we're a company that's based on facts, not fantasy. Um, along with the and maybe to go back to your question, sorry, Jane.
That's okay.
So it's the juniper, the kelp, bitter orange peel. And then, so that's the juniper and the citrus notes, and then you have the sort of spice notes, which would be the cubebs, which are peppercorns from Indonesia, coriander seed, cassia bark, again a little bit of that sort of spice, and then the three roots, which would be licorice, which is a condiment, and then licorice, angelica, and orris root. So some savory in there as well.
It's just spectacular.
Yeah.
I have to put this on my list to buy.
I got a nice spice note on the tip of my tongue that at first I confused for it being, too hot. And I realized that that wasn't the case because it was disappearing right away and it just sort of carried through. And then I rinsed my palate with water and there's a real lusciousness to it. It's pretty oily for a gin in a good way.
Okay, so thank you, Jordan. It's quite an interesting way of production as well. So the basis of gin is what we call GNS, grain neutral spirit, and a lot of it's made in Scotland. I mean, there's about 7 or 8 very large grain distilleries that make up a lot of what they produce is made into vodka and gin. Some of it goes into maturation for blended Scotch whisky. So we buy that in, and then we do our maceration process. But it's very important to then harmonize the esters and the phenols, etc. Some of the vapors, okay, the ethanol vapors, to get the real essence of the spirit. And so what we do is we put that through a rectifier, which is a little, I mean, up to me, it's probably about up to here, right? So it's probably about 3.5 foot. It's made of copper, okay? And it's called, in Gaelic, it's called a dotach, which means a small angry woman. I didn't make that up. That's what dotach means. And then we bring it down to 90 proof, which is a little bit, I mean, at 45% ABV, it'd be probably categorized as a higher proof gin, when a lot of the mainstream gins. There'll be a lot of comparisons tonight about how we do things, and then you've got the larger big brands and how they do it. But a lot of gins are bottled at 80 proof. So at 45, you've got, I think, a little bit more of an oil, to go back to your point, Jordan, possibly a little bit more of those slightly oilier, mouth-feely bits. Okay. Right. So that's just to get the sort of taste buds going, as it were. We're going to go on to the whiskey. And we're going to start with the first whiskey, and you'll have batch 11. The Hearach batch 11. So this is the Hearach. It's got this interesting slate. It's not a slate. It's actually, that color is Louisian gneiss. Gneiss spelt with a G, which is probably the oldest rock on the planet. So the Outer Hebrides, as Pangea, as the earth started, Pangea started fracturing, splintering, and the Atlantic Ocean and Greenland, Iceland, the British Isles, the Americas started to fracture off. It took about 3 billion years just to go back to the map. The Outer Hebrides was as the Atlantic Ocean was opening up, the Outer Hebrides was pushed up and then folded over. And so this rock, it's probably the oldest rock, on the planet. And the pressure and the heat and the odd ice ages over every 10 billion years or so. The water is very, very different to mainland Scotland, where it's much more porous rock. So the water we use to make our whiskey is very, very soft. In fact, we think it's the softest water. Okay. So I'm going to pour this. And by the way, we've got a lot of stuff to get through. So
does this, when you say it's the softest water, does that mean it has a small mineral content?
Exactly, Kate.
Okay.
And thank you for that, because, on mainland Scotland, and you'll see this in a lot of whiskey making regions, Ireland to, the Midwest of America, used to be a massive lake millions and billions of years ago, and the sediment turned into limestone. So water rain will fall, and that will seep through porous rock, limestone, sandstone, and then bubble up in a lovely picturesque spring. But it'll be full of magnesium and calcium and carbonates. So it'll be quite high it'll be a hard water. If your hard water flows through your taps and your faucets, you'll get a lot of build-up in lime scale. Okay. Whereas this water, I mean, the rock is, I've got some samples of the rock, but it's very dense and heavy. Water doesn't filter through. So the water that we use, flows from up on, a small lochen above the distillery, which sits on that, very, very hard rock. So, okay. The Hearach, by the way, is Scots Gaelic. It means somebody from the Isle of Harris. So we're a small community, 2,000 people. 1979, 1980, 4,000 people. Massive population decline. Half of the island's population emigrated. Young people. So it became a real crisis, actually, to sustain, the stable population. I think it's a stable population now. But for young people, when you leave high school on and by the way, there's more than 730 islands around Scotland, I think populated islands. Might be wrong on that. But it's hard to keep young people there because there's not many jobs. So the founder of the company, and by the way, we were founded in 2012, and the mission is all about community. It's about creating jobs for local people. So, we make our own whiskey. We don't buy whiskey in, but we make it in very small batches. I mean, you'll see here, these are very small wooden fermenters, and behind you have 2 copper pot stills, and you'll see the slant of the stills, but you'll see these long tubes, which are what we call shell and tube condensers. Okay. We take that lovely soft water, which we use in mashing. By the way, we bring the barley in. It's not possible to grow barley on many of these isles. Some of them, yes, not ours, because of it's very, very rocky. And we mash the barley, and then we ferment it in these wooden fermenters. So the fermentation time is up to 5 days, which is very, very long in Scotland. I mean, I've worked for distilleries that, ferment in stainless steel for a day and a half. Optimal, big batches. Of course, these distilleries are making a lot of spirit. I mean, global brands serving the entire globe. But we do it, and by the way, they're doing that in stainless steel, whereas we're doing this in wood. So we're getting a very long fermentation because, there's lots of porosity in the wood. And this is Oregon pine. So there's lots of live yeast and localized bacteria that are all feasting on the sugars. Okay, so it's called fermentation. Okay. But we don't add hops. I mean, if we add hops, we would be making beer. But in cleaning wise, stainless steel, you're going to be clinically clean, sterilizing the stainless steel fermenter, whereas here we're steam cleaning. So there'll still be a little residual bacteria there. And that's enough to give you a consistent style that's unique to your own distillery. So, and going back to this, I calculated that probably one of the most well-known distilleries in Scotland, from Scotland in America, is Glenlivet. And so I think we're about, for every 1,300 bottles that are produced at Glenlivet, we produce just one. So, all right. So this is, you have batch 11, and I sent you batch 11 because I thought that this was, of all the batches that I've been privy to, this stands out as probably the most island forward in terms of its smoky, maritime characteristic.
What the ppm on that?
Sorry, Golan, come. How you doing, Golan? Nice to see you.
Good to see you. What the ppm on that?
It's a good question. It's between 12 and 15 parts per million. So that would be considered quite low, particularly if you compare it with, you know, Lafroy or Lagavulin or even Ardbeg. In fact, Ardbeg would probably be even a little bit higher. But this is the wonderful thing about, you know, malt whiskey from Scotland is, and you wouldn't really get this from, you know, bourbon really, but it's that coastal maritime influence. I mean, there's some distilleries up here in Speyside that, you know, would peat their whiskey. They would use peat from this area. You know, local people would, you know, cut it, dry it, and then kiln it. But the peat here is very, very different. A lot of it's, you know, much more maritime. I mean, our warehouses are, I mean, you're not going to see anything here, but they face the Atlantic. So not only do we have that maritime, you know, that peat, but also you have that humidity. That's very important. You know, you imagine these Atlantic winds. I mean, that salty, you know, ocean wind coming off that massive body of water. And of course, you know, as barrels are made of oak, they're porous, and then, you know, of course, angel share, you know, you're losing a bit, but there's a little bit drawn in. And that's what quite common on the west of Scotland, but you won't really necessarily get that in other whiskey making, like in America, not really. So I hope you're picking up a bit of that peatiness.
I like how subtle that peat is.
Very subtle.
It sort of announces itself and then kind of slides to the side and lets other things play for a while. Kind of comes back. I just got like this huge hit of marzipan.
Okay.
There's like this note of mint in the middle for me, but this is lovely and it's incredibly soft.
Yeah.
It's
well,
really good.
Yeah, no, thank you for that. Marzipan. Oh, I love marzipan. In terms of you know, we double distill like most distilleries in Scotland, not all. But we're filling our spirit in first fill barrels, and the Hearach, all the batches have been aged in 3 types of barrel: bourbon, Oloroso, and Fino. Okay. Oloroso dominates because it's 85%. And when I say first fill, do we all understand when I say first fill? Can anyone tell me what that means when we talk in Scotch whiskey language? Bourbon, it's all, you know,
it's the first time it's filled following the original occupant of the cask.
But say that again.
It's the first time spirit is put in after the original occupant of the cask.
You've got it. You've absolutely nailed it. Yes. So when a bourbon barrel is emptied at Buffalo Trace Distillery or Heaven Hill, and quite recently Woodford Reserve, I think we're buying barrels. It goes onto a container shipped across the high seas, as are sherry barrels. But when they arrive, they still have quite a lot of residual bourbon and sherry. In fact, when I was on the island in May in 24, we were filling sherry butts, and you know, you could smell the humidity in the barrel. So anyway, so the first fill is when our spirit goes into that barrel when it gets off the boat. If I could liken it to a tea bag, you know, you'd steep a tea bag in hot water, and you go and make your toast, and you come back and you take the tea bag out. That tea is going to be very, very intense. It's going to be very, very dark. It's going to be very big. And Lots and lots of flavor. If you use a tea bag the next day, it won't be quite as intense. If you're completely cheap and you use it a third time, then, it's going to be a little bit less. But that same logic applies to a barrel. So all of this, and this is batch 11, go ahead and try 15 now. And because that's right, I don't have any. I sent Vadi my only bottle of batch 11, but I have very fond memories. So please enjoy it. But batch 15 for me, and I've got this, you get a lot of that first fill. So we're aging our whiskey round about 7 to 8 years, and then there's a marrying period. So the bourbon, the sherry, or the Oloroso and the Fino are then married to harmonize the liquid in what we call inert sherry butts. When I say inert sherry butts, there's probably still a little bit coming out of that wood, and then each batch is put into the filling tank, which roughly equates to about 1,000 cases. So that would be about, well, maybe about 12,000 six-pack cases. So we're talking about, well, I need to get do the arithmetic here. I would say it's about 750 to 800 bottles per batch. So that's how we've been putting the brand to market. When one batch is sold through, another batch comes in. So we're off to batch, and there's a ton of salinity, yeah. Quaker Oats, I like that one. I probably need to go back to the beginning. Yes, juicy, very juicy.
Yeah, the 11 had a salt note in the middle. This has like a honey note, which I'll tell you, I didn't even register the peat at all.
Okay.
It was not until with the first one. It's not until Golan said, what's parts per million, that I was like, oh wait, and then my brain did register it. But this, it balances in a different way, but not. I don't know if I'm ready to say better or worse, but different, and it's interesting.
Yeah, it is. I mean, it's so when you're selling it, whether to retailers or I do a lot of work in some of the nice, retail establishments where, customers are coming in, and sometimes they're looking for, a nice bottle. That bourbon has a big impact. I mean, we all know that bourbon's now commonly used in Scotland. In fact, bourbon dominates. Depending which cooperage you go to, they'll tell you that it's sort of 80% of Scotch whisky ages in bourbon, or it's 90% ages in bourbon. But I think what bourbon gives Scotch whisky is, that sweet vanilla, that honey, as you mentioned, Jordan. And then you got those baking spices, that cinnamon and clove and nutmeg. But what bourbon, I think, does superbly well for malt whiskey is it almost elevates that lovely barley sugar, and barley, and it shouldn't be any a surprise why most of the best bourbons will have a lot of malted barley in their mash bills, because barley will give you that, that fruity, nutty toast. Quaker Oats, that's a good one. That oaty, nutty, lovely barley sugar. But you get that slight maritime influence as well. But I think it also, you get a little bit of that green apple, and I think the sherry rounds it out a little bit. And as someone said, Jane, you said marzipan. I think someone had mentioned sort of slight lemony notes. Has a nice sweetness on the nose, like toasted Hawaiian rolls. I like that. Who? Jacob Friedman.
Yes, sir.
What? You're a poet.
Trying my best, man. Trying my best.
It's modesty. There you go. Batch 11 more. Okay. Yeah. Citrus. There you go.
I am curious
again,
though. I wasn't really getting citrus on the nose. However, on the palate, it was like a citrus bomb, which I very much enjoyed. So I'm curious, what aspects have that outcome?
That's somewhere in between the science, the art, and the alchemy. It's really, I mean, if Bill Lumsden would probably explain that beautifully well. Those who know Dr. Bill Lumsden of Glenmorangie and Ardbeg. But there's lots of flavor there, and as the flavors and the characteristics of the whiskey develop, it becomes a very complex, but a lot of the fruitiness comes in that longer fermentation. And these, by the way, these fermenters, just to show you again, I mean, they are 7,000 liters, but we put about 5,000 liters of ferment in them. And the other thing is, to get, there's very few distilleries will have fermentation and distillation in the same room. Most of the probably all the distilleries you've been to will have distillation in one room, fermentation in another. So there's a proximity to heat. But in the final product, to be frank, it's really what you get out of it, because we're all different. And all of the whiskies themselves are different. So what you get, might get something, a slightly different facet of that. So, I mean, that's, I guess, the magic of it. How very was that? But I guess it's true. All right.
On the fermentation, I thought when we met before, you mentioned that you guys shutting down on Sunday. So one fermentation is 3 days and one is 4 days? Or it's...
Yeah, so just to clarify, Golan, and you've got a good memory. So I said up to 5 days. The 40% is 3 days. Okay, so fermentation starts on Wednesday, and then Wednesday morning, and then so 40% is fermented from Wednesday on, and then 60. Most of it is 5 days. That gives you, again, it still gives you that that very fruity, complex fermentation. But so just to clarify, so 40% is 3 days, and then some of it, extends over the weekend to the next week. Okay. Wood chips or sawdust, some creamy vanilla. Juicier batch. Yes, definitely. I think batch 15 is juicier. Now, remember, all of these are first fill. All of our whiskies. So every whiskey that you're going to taste tonight is aged in first fill. So to compare with some of the larger distilleries, I mean, the distiller I used to work for, they're 10 years old, 12 years old. A portion of that would be first fill. A portion would be refill. And refill can be second fill, third fill. Okay, so and then we bottle at 92 proof, and we always bottle non-chill filtered because we believe that we don't want to bottle at cask strength because you'll never, get a true cask strength because, of course, we're batching multiple casks. So the best strength for us is 92 proof or 96% ABV, and then we bypass filtration. And that's basically the lowest you can go to avoid what we call flocculation. Okay, so if you bottle lower than 46, 92 proof, and you keep that bottle for a long, long time, over time, particularly if the temperature drops, and most of us live in the West Coast, so it probably doesn't apply unless you're up in the mountains, but you will avoid flocculation, that chill haze. But if you bottle at 46 and above, you don't need to worry about that. Okay. Michael, how are you doing? That's a beautiful collection behind you.
Thank you very much. I was actually going to pop on and say, come on now, like here in the Bay Area, most of these guys are down south. I think Anna's way up north. I'm in the Bay Area too. I got some bottles in my trunk that a couple of weeks ago got a little cold up here, and I went out and poured it. And I'm like, oh, hey, look, cloudiness. It means the flavors in it.
Yes. Yes. And that's such a great thing about whiskey. I mean, when you see that transformation and some of those oils, those fusel oils and those proteins and globules of color start to sort of the great fear of the industry, actually, because I used to work for Wild Turkey for a little bit, and I had the pleasure of working with Jimmy and Eddie Russell, and we had this big so when Campari bought Wild Turkey, and I digress a little bit here, when Campari acquired Wild Turkey, they bought Wild Turkey, the brand, but at the time, American honey flavored whiskey was growing. I mean, it was like, Cutwater and High Noon is today. People couldn't get enough of it. But there was a tiny little brand called Russell's Reserve. And they gave that brand to me. I was the first brand manager on that brand for Campari. And the first thing I did was I said, look, boss, I need to go to Lawrenceburg and meet Jimmy and Eddie and get some whiskey from the center cut. And they pulled it, and we wanted to bottle it non-chill filtered. We set the proof at was it 90 proof? Or 100, I can't remember, 90 proof. Anyway, so there was someone at the distillery that refused, he was the the quality control guy who said that, in the 90s that they had stopped non-chill filtered whiskey from Wild Turkey. And then he retired, and then basically the CEO said, yes, you can bottle Russell Reserve non-chill filtered. So I think we might have been one of the first, I guess in the modern era that went for that big single barrel, big, non-chill filtered. But anyway, in Scotland, we've been doing that for a long time. So this is non-chill filtered, and I'm on to the Oloroso batch 2. So we launched the Oloroso, we launched the Hearach in 23. So we started making spirit in 2015. So the first 3 years was basically building the distillery. It was on reclaimed land on the little harbour. There's a little ferry that goes to Skye once a day. You drive on it, you drive off it. And then from Skye, you can drive onto the mainland. But it's not the easiest place to get to. You can also get the ferry from a little bit further north up here to Stornoway, which is on Lewis. And then you would sort of drive down. Remember, it's the third biggest island in the British Isles. So although it looks tiny, it's actually pretty big. Anyway, I forgot what I was going to say, but we'll go on to the Oloroso cask. So we launched the Hearach in 2023. This came out probably about the middle of 2024. And so this is aged from 0 to full maturity in Oloroso sherry butts. It's not finished in sherry. It's 100% Oloroso. And you'll see a distinctive color change between this and the more bourbon forward big sister Hearach. What'd you get on this?
What's the approximate age on this?
So this is 6 years. And then there is a marrying time, which I think is about 14 weeks, if I'm not mistaken. But again, Jamshed, it's first fill. It's all first fill. So think about your Tetley's tea bag, English breakfast tea, and that first strain of that tea is going to give you lots of flavor. So again, this is all first fill. So noticeably, we don't put an age statement on the label, but
I'm reading some of the comments, and I'm gonna say something wildly different from what everybody in the comments is saying. I feel like the sherry does not play super well with the whiskey. To me, it feels like it's a disconnect. And it's so funny because I'm reading the comments and other people say, oh, it's well layered, it's well balanced and everything. And I find that they're like, oh, nope, they don't play well together. Well, on my palate.
Okay, it's very interesting. I remember the first time, one of my first job was in the industry was January 1995. And I worked for a company called United Distillers. And their big brand was Johnny Walker. But they also had the classic malts. And I remember taking a bottle of Lagavulin 16 years old back to my dad's house in Glasgow. We lived in Glasgow. And in those days, Lagavulin 16 years old was very, very sherried. If you go back, it was the 1960s where more bourbon was coming into Scotland. I mean, so a lot of the older scotches, a lot of the older brands, a lot of the older blends, would have much more of those, dry fruity notes, heavy notes. So sherry can be quite overwhelming.
I love sherry, just to be clear. Yeah.
You do love sherry.
Oh yeah. And I enjoy sherry finished and sherry, casked whiskeys. But it's just odd that I'm getting something, and I've tried it. I keep going back to it to make sure, like, what am I missing? So I just find it interesting that I'm really tasting something different. I'm curious to know if other people are having this discordant taste.
It might also be, Kate, that it's all first fill and it's a young age, because a lot of the sherry whiskies, like I say, are quite older. So those flavors have matured. You get a lot more of those balancing chocolatey notes and tobacco and this sort of saddle leathery notes, possibly. But I think what this is, I mean, it's got a ton of flavor. It's very, very, very intense. And some people, and there's a certain dryness on the finish. There are some people, though, that just have such a craving for sherry that, again, there'll be a lot of interest on sherry, story of sherry. We buy our butts from Jose Miguel Martin Bodegas, and they're down in Huelva in Andalusia. I believe, they also supply sherry to other distilleries, of course. But these sherry butts are beasts. The bourbon barrel have about 6 hoops. And 200 liters, 53 US gallons, whereas a sherry butt, much more of a bulge, a little bit taller, will have 10 hoops, but the capacity much bigger. It's 500 liters. And when you're buying barrels at a distillery, you want to, if you're the finance director, when you're buying barrels, that's a big investment, big investment for the future. And bourbon will give you several fills. Sherry will give you probably more because there's more surface area. And also sherry and more bourbon aged, can be quite different geographically. I went to Singapore. We sold one bottle, it's crazy, of a Glen Grant 70 years old. And we actually sold it quite quickly. Not to brag or anything, but there was, and this is going back about 3.5 years ago. So, there was still a market for big money. But over there, Hong Kong, big sherry. Whereas, North America, Europe, more of the bourbon sort of influence, I think, that those sweeter, marzipan, vanilla notes,
Kate, to your point, I'll say I think I'm a combination, because when I first taste it, I definitely taste the sort of raisin and the smoke separate. And then as it rolls in my palate, it combines and sort of finishes together. But the disjointedness you're talking about, I definitely start that way. But it doesn't clash for me. To me, it does finish coexisting. But that's just my palate tonight. But I totally hear you on the separation at first, because depending on where it hit my tongue, I feel them as if it's drinking two different things. But then somewhere it does, halfway through my palate, it blends and sort of finishes as this pretty powerful combo.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks. By the way, there's none of the components are problematic, right? Every component I'm tasting is great. I just get that disjointedness. But I hear what you're saying, Jordan.
Well,
maybe
I think also you've got
maybe I'll let it sit on my tongue a little bit longer. Yeah.
I think sometimes whiskey, it's an experiential product, and we started with the gin, and then we moved on to the 2 Hearachs, and then we went to the sherry. When I'm, talking to consumers, and the general public, I'll say that the bourbon, or this one, is more bourbon forward. So you'll recognize some of those notes. There's not a huge leap from some of your bourbons. I mean, there's a big leap, but there'll be reminders. And this is nice on the rocks, as a aperitif dram. This is more after dinner, I think. If you're around the fire plate, the fire pit, perhaps with your old high school buddies, putting the world to rights, this might sort of intrigue the palate a little bit. Solve some of those little riddles, Kate, and these little conundrums. And that's I think the challenge that some whiskey sometimes gives us. Okay. I'm not keeping up so much. I mean, feel free to chip in. Let's make it a discussion. I mean, this is.
I think that I'm surprised that it's not more sherry, considering its first fill 6 years. It should be rougher. I think the low ABV is what takes away from the sherry punch. It almost neutralizes it at 46%. Because if this was at 55, it'd be a whole other animal.
Oh, undoubtedly. Undoubtedly.
Because at this point, it's almost like a 50-50 sherry bourbon impression that I get. There's no way I would have guessed it's 100% sherry cask.
It's 100% first fill Oloroso.
Yeah. I think that effort is diminished at 46%. Thank you.
Another thing that I've on all of these that I've tasted, and Jordan, I think, alluded to it during the gin tasting, is that there's a spiciness, and I really enjoy it, and it hangs at every single one of these so far has this spiciness to it, and I'm trying to figure. I understood where the spiciness came from the gin, okay, but now I'm curious, where does the spiciness come from these whiskeys? Because it's anyway, I like it.
Well, I think I would get more. So bourbon, you will get those baking spices. We used to spend a lot of time writing tasting notes when we first put out the Russell's Reserve single barrel. Remember, we're like scribbling tasting notes. So it ended up to be a nightmare. I mean, then we stopped it. But quite often you would get clove, nutmeg, allspice, but then I think the sherry will have a little bit of that too, with some of maybe the fig and the apricot and someone mentioned raisins. Yes, they're fruity, but it's on the certain spectrums, etc. What are we doing next, just to make sure that I'm
For me,
following?
it was this salty caramel candy first thing that you get from the Oloroso.
Salty caramel candy. I mean, I wish we could splash that and blazon that across the label and sell it in little round bottles, liquor stores. But yes, and that goes back to maritime coastal. Okay, it's the Golden Globes, isn't it? All right, those LAians.
Yes.
By the way, just to quickly, so forgot to mention that you may have heard of the Harris Tweed. Harris Tweed is, well, guess where Harris Tweed comes from?
The Isle of Harris. The Isle of Harris.
Correct. So we've you look at the bottle. This might not be, but if you hold the bottle up to the light, so you have these ridges, these lines that go across the way and down the way, and that's known as the weft and the warp of the Harris Tweed. So so we're an island of weavers, and so we've decorated the bottle to really, again, fact, not fantasy. We don't have a big Hollywood movie star that's trying to sell our brand. It's not made up. We don't buy whiskey from a supplier and slap our label on it. So that's very important for us to in the big bad world stamp our personality. And we're an independent company. We're not owned by Suntory or Diageo or Pernod Ricard or BlackRock or Goldman Sachs. We are independent. All right. So this cask, it was some contact. There's a contact that we have who lives in Los Angeles. He's always worked for Scottish television. As a young man, he was a reporter in Scotland, and now he's lives in sort of Hollywood area. And during the Oscars, he does his report. Well, he, through that contact, we bottled a barrel for exclusively for the Golden Globes. Went into the so-called $1 million gift bag. And, we did it in good faith and in the hope that it would give us a little bit of sort of PR, a little bit of a PR buzz. But I managed to get 2 bottles of this to share with you. So this is bottle, you might have, is it bottle 32 you've got? Because I've got bottle 31. So Vadim got the other bottle.
I think it's a 39. Let me go grab it.
39.
But is this basically the Hearach, but a special bottling of it?
No,
Or-
this is 100% bourbon.
Oh, I got you. Okay.
And this was a Buffalo Trace barrel.
No, I was wrong. It is number 32.
So it's 32. Okay, so I have 31, so it's the same barrel. So this was bottled at 57.5. So to compare this with the Hearach, it would be very different. Age-wise, I'm assuming it's 6 years, 7 years.
What's striking to me, and maybe this is a cumulative effect, I should drink water, but the spice finish just dances on my tongue for like an hour. I mean, it's a crazy long finish.
Yeah, I totally agree. And it's not like subtle or like sweet baking spices. It's picante, right? It's got all my taste buds firing and dancing and
Partying, yes.
yeah, it's the salsa going on in there.
Oh,
It's like
yeah.
hop rocks of baking spices. It's
So, we started with a slow march. Then we went into a bit of a strathspey. Now we're on to the real, and then I think we'll be on the hornpipe next. The jig. When you all go crazy and bodies start flying all over like a good old Scottish wedding. Something that if you ever have the chance to go to a Scottish wedding, memory of a lifetime. Anyway, I digress.
I got sandalwood.
Say that again, Golan.
Sandalwood.
What wood?
Sandalwood, like the sand.
Sandalwood, yes. Yes, sandalwood. Yeah, very interesting, the single barrels that, there's been such a huge wave. Many distilleries have had to sort of rejig their stock, their strategy, their aging strategy, and they're allocating stock to putting out barrels. I mean, one of the amazing things, with Wild Turkey was that we had this planning meeting. I mean, Campari was not used to managing assets of maturing whiskey. When you make Campari or you make Aperol, it's like made in the morning, afternoon, packaged, shipped out the door in the morning, the following day. And so we all met down in Kentucky, and we thought, well, the distillery was saying, look, you got to tell us what we're you're going to sell. I mean, we were the marketing people. I think there was a couple of salespeople there as well. It's you've got to, we can't, be an efficient distillery without a bit of direction here. This is a little bit of the insight into the industry, friends. That your stock is your most valuable asset, and and as liquid ages, it changes. Sometimes there'll be a certain row of barrels, a rick on a rack that can be quite special. It can be the right spot of the rick house, and just magic keeps happening. Well, we encountered this, and I was the new brand manager on Russell's, and we could do something with some of these older stocks, and we could charge higher prices, etc. And but as we broke up for lunch, a couple of the planning people, and I just picked up as I walked out, and they said, "What are we going to do with these?" I think it was 150 cases, barrels, sorry, of 1998 Wild Turkey, and the plan was to just dump it into 101 Wild Turkey over time. Teaspoon it, just because it's every year they have to pay tax in Kentucky, and there's a very high evaporation. Well, anyway, to end a long story, we managed to earmark that stock and put it aside, and we bottled the 1998. And out of 150 barrels, only 23 of them had any liquid in them. There was 127 barrels that were dry as a bone. So anyway, the private barrel thing, I don't know how long it's going to last, but as many things, the industry is always cyclical. And even within these cycles, you'll get something that spikes and then falls away. Who knows if that's, private barrel scenario. But for the longer term, distilleries have to have their house style, their product. And now we're at a point where we have a nice balance of inventory. And so later this year, we'll be putting out an Isle of Harris single malt, which will be our house style, which will be bourbon and sherry, bourbon than sherry, and will it be a more accessible price point? So it'll be about, $49 and $59.99, depending. Whereas, right now the Hearach's, depending where you're, this will be about closer to $100. The Oloroso will probably be, round about 100.
Mission has both of them without knowing what batch number for about 90 and 100. So that's about right. It's like 88 change, something like that. Really random numbers.
Well, so what we're also going to do, Jane, is we're going to stop putting the batch number, even on the Hearach and the Oloroso, because again, our first in 2015, our fillings of casks and barrels is quite short. Following year, a little bit more. So, in the last few years, we've we actually had to build another warehouse. So now, that gives us a distillery much more flexibility. Some of the very small distilleries will be putting out multiple expressions, which is great, but how long is that sustainable? When does the retailer get, if your brand's not moving, I need to switch out to something else that moves. It's you have to always, there has to be a balance between what you lay down in stock and then what you forecast in the future, and really what you can how much the market is prepared to absorb. I've seen many brands, we've set ourselves up where every brand will have 10, 12, 15, 18, 21, 25, 30. And in between, there'll be lots of different expressions. Okay. And that's more of I would say, the established distilleries. But even some of the smaller distilleries, I won't mention any names, have got a number of expressions. We have really two, which is the Hearach and the Oloroso, but we will be joined by this more accessible one. So we'll have three, and then these, the Golden Globes is not really available to the public, but K&L, it's only available to K&L. So we'll probably continue to, in fact, this year I think we'll sell a few retailer labeled private barrels across the country. All right.
Thank you for including this one because it was like a very cool experience to taste something that isn't even available. However, I'm curious if it's the pressure of like the Golden Globe title, but I just felt like it was very good, but it felt also very one-dimensional. But I'm curious what other people's thoughts are.
I wasn't thrilled. Not that I didn't like, but the beginning of it didn't entice me in an amazing way. But that finish I thought was pretty something to write home about. That to me was the part that was like, whoa. But yeah, that's my thought. Not that I didn't like the other parts, but it was at the finish that I was like, okay, this is different. They're great.
I think Jordan and I are like smoking the same stuff tonight because that's how I felt about it too. Yeah. By the way, I'm now onto this next one, the K&L. It's like it hits you right up front very differently from the Golden Globe. So
I also think the Golden Globe one had an interesting freshness, especially when freshly poured, kind of an herbal quality almost to it. And then now that it's sat there for a while, it's leaned a lot more into this woody note, not like really dusty old, but this oak note that's really coming through in a different way.
We lost our speaker.
hey Jane, are you gonna take a photo before we finish our glasses here?
We lost
If you go on with that beard, you got a Manny Patinkin thing going on in such a positive way. I mean that in all the complimentary ways.
Pretty badass.
He has a way bigger smile than Mandy Patinkin. Yeah.
But Manny Patinkin, like with that beard, his eyes kind of sparkle and like go in your eyes, just like pop, and it's pretty rad.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Trent, that's funny. Holy shit! Yeah.
Yeah. Hopefully Robin's internet will let him come back. There he is.
There he is. There he is.
There he is. Hi, Robin, we missed you. You're muted, my friend. Oh, looks like you might still be having trouble.
Oh, yeah, he's frozen up a bit. Well, I think K&L really knows how to pick them.
Yeah.
Not enough coal in the Bay Area.
For binnies and you know,
Might as well do the poll.
There you are, Robin. We
We got
missed you.
Robin. Yeah.
You got your face, but not your volume.
You're still unmuted. You're still muted, I mean.
can you hear me now?
There you are. Welcome back.
Oh, thank you. All right. So on the K&L cask, are you all on the K&L cask now?
We're all on the K&L cask with you.
So this, I believe, was the Heaven Hill cask. Give me a sec. Let me just check this.
Well, he's looking for
Oh,
that.
it's Buffalo
I'll grab
Trace.
a glass.
Buffalo Trace.
Buffalo Trace.
Buffalo Trace. Yeah.
So before we get too deep in the weeds for the K&L, everybody come back on camera and raise a glass. We'll do our traditional toast. Robin, thank you so much for being here with us tonight. This was fantastic. I'm sure anybody that missed it is going to be very jealous. Everybody smile and say cheese. Let's see if I got a good one. Oh, everybody's eyes are open. I'm so proud. Okay. Thank you. The nose on this is lovely.
It almost reminds me of like, I don't know what it was. It was like a gummy vitamin that I used to take when I was a kid, but like a lemon flavor. It's really good.
A gummy vitamin.
In the best possible way, basically. It was the only one that
I didn't say anything.
eat. It feels like on this one, the citrus is the most well-rounded. Like it isn't like a citrus bomb. It's like the perfect amount of citrus, a little bit of like that peat, but like a hint of it, like the idea of peat being there.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I get the citrus, I get the spice notes all throughout it, including at the end. I get a little bit of a funk note that I get from like a Springbank or Glen Alecky in a good way. It's really kind of pleasant throughout, bouncing around flavors, but maintaining it the whole way.
Interesting. Yeah.
Is this particular expression still available? If so, does
Oh,
it
yeah.
cost the kidney?
K&L 10900, $109 a K&L.
Yep. It says it's available at every store. So
With K&L, no matter what store it's in, they'll transfer it to your store for free.
yeah.
Don't tempt me with a good time.
Yeah. I mean, a retailer said, we know that people will pay up to, one retailer said to me recently, $150 is a sweet spot. I mean, that's quite a high price, right? I mean, $150, that's a lot.
I would disagree with that. I think the sweet spot is below $100.
Right. I think so. I think you're right. But I think for a private barrel, it's probably around about $100 to $150. Because the thing about private barrels or single casks is that they're always limited, and like they're like people, they're like human beings. Each one is different, and once it's gone forever. And that's the real incentive.
Yeah.
The
ABV is higher on this as well. And so that,
well, it's a little bit, it's 56.6. So was it 58?
Well, I meant it's higher than the 46ers, right? I mean, you're going to pay a little bit more
Yes.
just because of the ABV.
Well, you're absolutely right there, Kate, because there's a higher cost of goods.
Mhm.
So you're gauging the alcohol at a higher strength, okay? So when, it goes through the, well, we would ship under bond. But when it comes into America, they'll levy a higher import tax because of the alcoholic strength. So when it gets to the consumer, so people, the discretionary income, Jay, as you know, it's as alluded to, it's that sweet spot, I think, is probably round about between $40 and $60. And the thing is, there's an unbelievable choice of amazing whiskies at that price. Absolutely. I mean, the consumer is spoiled rotten. I mean, I saw, we had a global alliance with Suntory before Suntory bought Beam, and for Beam and Wild Turkey to be in the same house, that was the end, and but when we bought Yamazaki 12 years old, and it was $39.99 into America. We seeded it in California and in New York. The 18 years old was $79, $89.99. And that was kind of on par with, some of the other brands like Glenrothes, Select Reserve. The 1985 vintage was probably around about that, close to $100. Then it went up like a rocket. $250 for the 12 years old. Hakushu as well. I was in a store the other day and it was like $50 off a bottle. So, distilleries, like I said, it's a cyclical industry. You could go from boom to bust very, very quickly. If you make too much stock and, you can't shift to, the changing consumer consumption patterns. So I would expect, for whiskey drinkers, we're facing our heaviest headwinds we've ever faced. I think probably since World War II. You've got rising costs. Now, rising costs are energy costs, labor costs, grain costs. That's all costing us more. All of our, dry goods, glass bottles, labels, all costing us more. Tariffs. Then we're getting hit with slowing, declining consumption, inflation, cannabis, Wegovy. I mean, that's now another one that they're talking about in the industry news, that Zembic Wegovy is also stopping people drink. So and now we've got well, we're just about to even go galactic on energy costs now. So I don't think we've had. I can't think. I mean, maybe the 70s. We had a lot of stock in the Scottish whiskey industry. In the sort of 80s, so early 90s, because there was a bit of a dip. The oil crisis, but this is, oof. We hear all the time about distilleries ramping down production, going to split shifts, stopping, production, half of the year, switching, staff from one distillery to another. You do a morning shift at, I don't know, Glendronach, evening shift in Glenglassaugh. I mean, it's, oof. And the other thing is like, you think about, you know, Kentucky and Scotland, Ireland. I mean, these are rural places, you know, where, you know, have you ever been to Aberlour or Craigellachie, Dufftown, you know, Dornoch? I mean, these are small communities. So
Robin, can
people
you
start drinking, please.
talk about how it's influenced your company? Is a very small company compared to the giant because you've been through all of them. And yeah, you mentioned Dr. Bill. He was here in LA last weekend. So
Okay.
this crisis is going to last for another 4 or 5 years. But I'm wondering, as for what we're drinking tonight, how for good or bad, kind of, is it easier to survive through that, or it's almost choking?
You know, it's, yeah,
Need to stop supporting in any.
you're a marketing guy, right, Golan? Okay. You know what a SWOT analysis is? Strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. So we've got a lot of strengths, you know, our liquid is good, our packaging, our story. You know, we've got lots of opportunity because we're tiny, minuscule. You know, threats, obviously, I've just spelled out, you know, the macroeconomic, you know, we've got, you know, even in the Middle East where you come from, Golan, we've had a growing consumer, you know, across the Arab and, you know, Middle East and across Israel and into India. You know, we've been, you know, seeding these markets and, you know, duty-free stores and, you know, Abu Dhabi and Dubai, you know, and across further afield across the US. But it's really, really tough. But, you know, but our big weakness, I suppose, is that nobody knows us. You know, and I was in Texas like the week before last, and, you know, in Texas, all big chains. You know, in New York and in California, there's lots of independent retailers, fantastic independent retailers. And, you know, that's where we focus. You know, we focus on that consumer that is still interested. They tend to be in higher, you know, spec areas. They tend to be, you know, curious people who are interested. They want to explore and discover. You know, they don't want to buy mainstream. You know, they like a good story. They like a brand with purpose, you know, not just another brand that's owned by, well, today it's owned by a big company and then tomorrow it's owned by an even bigger company, right? So I think that's, you know, a big strength of ours. But, you know, like in Texas, I would be in these stores and people would come in and they didn't even want to try, even though I was, you know, serving free alcohol, like little sips. No, it's okay. And, you know, they go to what they want, pick it up, you know, be a whatever. No, so for us, we have to be very pinpoint in where we, you know, put the brand in front of the consumer. So it's less is more. So we're looking for the consumer like you, Golan. You know, it's interesting. You know, it's got a deep passion. You know, will, you know, have an open mind that will ask questions and, you know, and get deep into it. And, you know, now we're seeing, I mean, like since the distillery opened, I mean, I think this year we're going to get to 700,000 visitors to the distillery in 10 years. I mean, amazing, you know, so we've got a chance. I mean, we're now in Terminal 5, London Heathrow. And we sell a Hearach. We call it Croft strength. So it's a little bit higher strength than the Hearach in the, what we call the domestic market. And then the gin, it's called tidal strength, and it's 100 proof. The gin, it comes in the same bottle. By the way, this is the bottle. Don't throw this bottle away if you buy a bottle of it. It'll become your favorite refrigerator water bottle or a lampshade. I've got one. Actually, I've got something here. Yeah, how cool this is. I can see that, but
I actually was figuring I'd end up doing something just like that.
hang on, wait a minute.
Nice and cold, Golan.
Oops. Trying to find the dimmer switch.
It's my go-to gin now. It's straight.
Is it? Is it? All right. Can you see that?
Oh yeah, it's pretty.
I know.
Golan, do you have the cask strength or do you have the other one?
I cask drink. I think it's duty free only. He said that's 45.
Oh, it's been in the freezer. That's how you should serve it. So there's a famous, if you ever go to London and you want a very, very, very authentic experience in London, go to Duke's Bar in St. James's. And during the war, this is where, a lot of the, quite a lot of Americans would come in, military, but a lot of the British sort of Secret Service, including Ian Fleming, who then went on to create the character James Bond. But Duke's is, you can only have 2 drinks, but they'll come up and they'll make the martini. And in fact, the legend has it that the shaken not stirred was, coined in the Duke's Bar. But with this, you just put it in the freezer. You don't have to shake it or stir it, Golan. So you're showing the way.
Very
Good
clever.
man.
Before we get too far out of it, I wanted to see, we did a poll for the night. And I wanted to see if you wanted to guess what our favorite was tonight.
Me?
Yes.
Well, I don't think it's going to be the Oloroso. Well, maybe it might be, because Kate mentioned that there was a little bit of a puzzlement there. So, and I can understand that because as we talked about, the Hearach batch 11 would draw in a lot of those PT island aficionados. I think people were leaning to the K&L private barrel. I'm not going to.
Oh, look at that.
All right.
Okay. I can't vote because I'm hosting, but I would have voted for batch 11. So they're all really good, but
yep.
Anyway, there it is.
I vote to the K&L, but batch 11 was my second favorite.
Second, okay. Yeah.
If K&L was not included, batch 11.
Yeah, well, that's the thing. You have to make a decision on, 5 things that you all think that have stand up in their own right.
Yep.
Yeah.
3 guesses as to who voted for the gin.
Oh, well, I mean, the thing about the gin is that, it's amazing how many people who tell me, "Oh, I don't like gin," and then you find out the reason is because when they were at college, they had a bad experience.
So many bad.
They drank cheap gin and they drank too much of it, and they didn't drink it in the right way. And but there's certain things you have to get over in life, and we all have the capacity of it. So I always, in fact, I was in Illinois and they have these massive stores called Binny's, okay? And they're like Walmarts. I mean, they're absolute massive high ceilings. I mean, you feel like that big, right? In one of these. And they put you in this end of a massive aisle. It's like about a mile of bourbons, Tennessee whiskies, blended whiskies, Canadian whiskies, world Scotch whiskies, and then someone will come in and this night this guy came in and he was like, I said, "Would you like to try some gin, sir?" And he goes, "I hate gin." I'm like, "Okay, hate gin?" I mean, that's quite a strong word, but anyway, fine. Anyway, so within a few minutes, there was about 8-10 people around me, and we were kind of chewing the fat, and a bit of laughter, a bit of life, a little bit of energy. And I could see this guy. He was kind of like, "What the hell's going on there? Am I missing out?" FOMO. And he kind of got a bit close. He goes, "Okay, I'll try it." And anyway, tried it. He goes, "That's amazing." He bought 2 bottles. So we went from I hate gin to buying 2 bottles, and gin that cost $60 a bottle. I mean, he spent $120 on 2 bottles of gin, and he hated gin.
Nice.
When it's good, it's good.
Yeah. I rediscovered gin probably a dozen years ago, maybe 14 years ago now. When I went to a small distillery in Colorado, and they had their gin, and I thought, well, I'm not gonna like it, but it's a taster, I'll go for it. And I tasted it, I was like, wow, this is amazing. This is not like the gin I used to get drunk on, like you said, Robin. And yeah, so these yeah, and you're doing something different here with the sugar kelp, and the juniper isn't the loudest thing in the botanicals.
Yeah.
It may be the strongest thing because that's a necessity or whatever it is by the rules, but it isn't the thing that slaps you in the face like the gin from my youth. So I've been enjoying gin, for the last 14 years, different gins, and I'm glad to get this one. Was a real surprise. I didn't know what to expect with it, but I really enjoy it. And I think it's a sipping gin. You don't have to mix it. So.
Exactly.
Oh, thank you, Jacob. Did you hear that? Oh my God. It says my internet connection. Jacob Friedman. I hated gin until tonight.
It was the worst thing I've ever had, except for no.
Have I met you before? Have I met you before?
Possibly,
One
but
of the people that have come up to me and said, "I hate gin."
Yeah, gin is honestly the worst hard liquor ever. But this gin is like sweet Fruit Loops with salt water, and I'm like, okay, if this was what gin tasted like in college, I think I would have learned to drink responsibly, take my time, use a Glencairn. You don't need to put Fresca in there. No, this gin is phenomenal. So
just to be clear for everybody, college was like a year ago for Jacob. So
okay, yeah, no, I
graduated 2 days ago.
As you age like a good whiskey,
yeah, there you go,
Jacob, you start to develop these different facets of your character and your personality, and your taste change as well. And you should never, and I believe this, you should never sort of say never to anything, no matter how big it is, and that maybe, hopefully, we'll need that to create peace on the planet someday. We'll have to, get over these, I don't know, these barriers, but yes, Lots of great questions, lots of great feedback. Shame to see Jay and Jordan leave, and
A
Michael.
lot of them have dad duties and things they've got
Yeah,
to
yes,
deal
but I'm
with.
happy to stay in, the last 15 minutes if anyone wants to chit chat and, unmute. We've got a good group
That's
here.
perfectly fine. If you guys want to chat, I can just stop the recording and we can just shoot the
Yeah.
breeze.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
I guess for me, I am curious. So, like the Kate and Now store pick, that doesn't have anything to do with like your company. Well, the distillery. It's not like it's a special barrel made for Kate and Now. It's Kate and Now picked that specific barrel. I might have guessed it if you said it, but what exactly was that barrel? Like is it something that can be bought outside of Kate and Now, but obviously
No,
not the store pick?
yeah, so the concept of a private barrel is that there's one customer and the customer takes custody of that barrel. But what we do is we bottle that barrel for that customer. So Scotch malt whiskey, single malt Scotch whiskey by law has to be bottled in Scotland. Blended Scotch could actually be bottled outside Scotland. So, and some of it is. I think India bottles a lot of Scotch whiskey, which is mixed with, not
So,
actually go back. Bulk whiskey could be shipped to Latin America or India and bottled as Scotch whiskey, but it cannot be mixed with anything because then it would legally would not be Scotch whiskey.
so K&L, the tasters went to your distillery.
No, sometimes that happens, Kate. In this,
You sent them tasters.
in this instance, I think I wasn't involved in this barrel pick, but the salesperson would go in with some of these little miniatures. Would sit down and the buyer would, oh, I like that one. Yeah, not sure about that one. Pick, okay, this one. Fill out a
Oh,
form.
so they might have done that here in California, for instance.
Oh yeah.
Okay.
I mean, sometimes, like I've worked for distilleries where there's been a big PR budget where we've flown over, buyers from Park Avenue Liquors, New York, or Mission Liquors and pass it, well, I'm just making this up, but
Yeah.
or they'll go there on vacation, buying trip or whatever, and they'll go to the distillery. But either way, they'll or sometimes, with Russell's Reserves, we'd have retailers, oh, we don't care, just pick a barrel, anyone, just as long as we get a barrel, doesn't matter.
Got it.
It's got to be their barrel,
Right.
And then what we'll do is we'll populate, you'll see on the label, you might see it, it says K&L.
Mm.
So we put the barrel number, okay, and then we'll put the bottle. Every label will have the bat or the cask number and then the bottle number. And typically a bourbon barrel will give you, so we had 200, this yield was 208 bottles. We actually, on the Outer Hebrides, we have a slightly higher temperature than the mainland. And the ullage rate, and ullage is angel's share, the scientific name, ullage, or the industry, so is the evaporation. Okay. 221. Yeah. The first K&L was 137 bottles. It was a leaker, but in Scotland it's about 2.1% you'll lose in ullage each year. Now it depends a lot on the warehouse, if it's a concrete modern warehouse, steel framed, or if it's one of these old dunnage warehouses with earthen floors. So about 2.1% in mainland. On Harris, it's plus 3%. So we
Wow.
actually have faster rate of evaporation, you know. Yeah.
I'm curious, when you are enjoying the products of the distillery you represent, what are some of the scotches that you personally enjoy?
Do we
Oh
need,
gosh.
is the recording still going?
Recording's on. I can turn it off.
No, I can, no, that's
Oh,
fine. I mean,
sorry.
Yeah,
I
I
thought
can
the
pause.
recording was off a while ago.
well, I've always, I love this industry because I guess for the romance of the industry and the history, and I'm Scottish. I was from Edinburgh. My father lives in Perth. My ancestors were from Perth. My third great grandfather was a farmer and a spirits dealer. But getting into the industry, for me, it was like, I think I'm in my 32nd year or my 31st year. So I started in January 95. And because there's a great deal of passion and like the romance, very emotional, it's an emotional thing. So every distillery that I've worked for, there's emotional bonds. I mean, like Bill Lumsden, he's a great friend. I had dinner with him, lunch, about a year and a half ago. He was staying not far from here. And, Bill and I used to work. Rachel Barry, when I sold whiskey in Latin America, she would do my blend recipes, the Russells at Wild Turkey, Russell's Reserve, I always have, strong affinities. Like, Glen Rothes, Bowmore, Glen Geary, Glen Grant. I was with Glen Grant for probably 15 years. Dennis Malcolm. He retired. We were, I left and he retired at more or less the same time. I love, Glen Grant. I know it intimately, but I wouldn't say I'm an expert. There's tons of whiskey I've never tasted. If you ask me, what do you think of the Highland Parks of the 1990s? I wouldn't be able to tell you, but because it's such a broad industry, there's so much going on. It's it's like wine, it's they're making it everywhere now, and we're one of the first countries to make whiskey, but Scotch is special because I'm Scottish, and Golan. I'm friends with oh gosh, what's his name from your neck of the woods? What's his
Summer?
Tal
Tal,
from Milk and Honey.
Tal Putner. Yeah, they have a rough few years.
Yeah.
Not easy to market whiskey during war.
No, well, we're all having the same headwinds. Your brother-in-law's from Perth, Trent Zimmerman.
Yes, sir.
Your
The Ward
brother-in-law's
family.
from Perth. That's from my dad lives in Perth. Do you know what pub he knows? I know Perth.
Oh gosh.
Pubs. The Ship is one of a.
I'd have to ask him what his pub was.
Yeah, there's quite a few pubs.
Yeah.
Perth. The pub at the end of my dad's street, they just sold it. The owner, they've had it for, gosh, 20 something years. Just sold it. So
you recognize your relative by the pub.
well, in these small towns, that's where people kind of. Or 100 years ago, it was the church they would, worship in. Now it's more the pub. Or probably now the vape shop.
The vape shop.
Well,
That's
I don't know if
great.
you follow the Scottish news. There was a very old, beautiful building in Glasgow that caught fire.
Yeah.
Next to
Oh, I saw that.
the main
Oh.
train station, and the fire started in a vape shop.
Right, with the batteries, right?
Aye.
It's tough. I couldn't believe, and they burned so many people out. Just a little vape shop. It was probably just a little tiny
Yeah.
vape, whatever, and it destroyed so much. It was amazing.
Yeah, well, it's the same. I mean, I can't save that building. I mean, that building was, built of red sandstone, You imagine the army of stonemasons and skilled, craftsmen building that building, and that's gone
Yeah.
in a day.
Yeah.
Terrible. Terrible.
Which batch is the one in Costco?
Well, so our importer has put our gin in Costco. And then I think we've sold, a couple of times to Costco. When we sell to Costco, we try and limit it to only a small number of cases. Here's the thing. I mean, this is the complexities of this industry. Like you can be a brand that, America's if you're a small island in Scotland or small distillery, you're selling in the UK, you're selling a little bit to France, Germany, blah, 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 Scandinavian markets. But you need more than that to kind of get your distilleries, company solvent. It's America, it's that's the big land of opportunity. It always has been, for all of our exporters. And over the years, you've seen brands go from 0 to 100. Beatles 0 to 100. Overnight. And so there's I guess it's a kind of cultural thing. You want to you have these big lofty expectations. So when you put the brand in, you sell it to all these places, and at the same time, another 10 brands, new brands come in, and all the other existing brands have their limited expressions. You find out like the consumer's completely bamboozled with so much choice. And the first order, you're like, where you punch in the air. The first order is big. Let's get the next container on the water, ship it across the pond. But then, brands can sort of sit with it's so much choice, and traffic's slowed down. The next order might not come along, and Costco's can, you can go into Costco and go from 0 to 100, like I said, very quickly, and but then rely on Costco for orders coming in. Okay, Costco's one place. I mean, there's other places, but let's say you get the deck chair out because you're in Costco. But what happens if Costco get a new offer from another brand and say, well, yeah, we like your brand, but we think our customer's ready for something else. See you later. I mean, all your eggs are in one basket, right? So, but the thing is, our industry is a long-term industry, and although we're facing headwinds, and we've got the challenge of stabilizing our business, and getting more people like yourselves understanding our brand. It's like block and tackling. I spend a lot of my time walking up and down streets, knocking on liquor store doors to sell them, hand selling it, store by store, customer by customer. You know, we're not spending lots of money on advertising. We can't afford to, you know. So we have to be, you know, we have to be absolutely have a plan, you know what we're going to, what it takes to get there. Everyone has to be, you know, facing the same direction, aligned. But I guess if we can do that, you know, the sharper the pinprick. But, you know, it takes a long time. I think it takes 10 years to establish a brand, you know. And so that, you know, has a little bit of equity. The consumer does, you know, in your target, know the brand. Right now, we're kind of on our road there. But, you know, we'll limit supply to Costco. We don't want to be over dependent on, you know, one big, powerful retailer because of the obvious. You know, if they pull the plug on you, pull the rug, you know.
Cheaper than everyone else, so.
Sorry?
They're always going to be cheaper than everyone else, and you.
Well, and this is another thing, is that they'll pay themselves a much lower margin than, you know, that retailer that's on the, you know, up in Pacific Heights.
Yep.
You know, paying landlords exorbitant, you know. So there's always, you've got to balance it, you know. And, you know, there's levers you can pull, buttons you can press to, you know, try and keep that balance. But I mean, we're constantly, you know, spinning plates on sticks. How are you doing, John?
Good. Hey, can't tell if I'm on. Everything was good tonight. I'm the lone guy that voted for the Oloroso. That's just me. But you know, batch 11 was second, so I think batch 11 was everybody's second tonight.
Interesting.
So that says something.
So on aggregate, it was probably number one, maybe.
I'd say so.
Yeah.
Yeah, people raved about it. Many people noted that it was their second choice. So yeah.
Let me just tell you something about
First choice.
our distillery. So I mentioned at the beginning that, you know, the mission of the distillery was to, you know, stop some of the arrest that decline of young people leaving. So the mission was to create opportunities for people in the community. Gosh, I think I've lost my train of thought. Well, what was I saying? Oh gosh.
Keep the young people from going.
Ireland.
Yeah, no. So we employ young people at our distillery, give them opportunities. But like I said, it's a long-term mission, right?
Yeah.
And like, given everything else that I've mentioned, you know, these whiskies are young whiskies, and you know, they're brought to market. You know, we get the benefit of being a new distillery because all our barrels are first fill. So that's a big, you know, advantage, and that I think that would apply to some of the other distilleries that you may have tried. Certainly, I guess a little bit further back would be Kilchoman. You know, Arran, you know, so now we have Rassay, Nick Nean, Loch Lee, Ardnamurchan, Torreveig. You know, there's some cracking distilleries out there that are doing some really good things. But I think where we are having a gin, you know, which is really a unique gin, and at the beginning, the vision was to, you know, be a malt whiskey distiller, and the gin, you know, was, I think, may have even been a kind of halfway house until, you know, we bridged the business into making whiskey. But and by the way, the two processes of making the gin and the whiskey are very, very different. but for me, selling a gin and a whiskey, it's a little bit different from, my past, where it was very much, whiskey, 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 either without an E or with the E.
Yeah, but a lot of smaller distilleries get their start by doing gin and vodka, because they can get those out the door right away, right? So that makes sense from an economics perspective. But once they get their whiskey going, oftentimes their gin or their vodka is left by the wayside. It's not that interesting. It was just something, but you actually have a gin that is interesting and that is really pleasant, right? It's not, to me, it might have just started out as a stepping stone, but it's you've got something real there.
Yeah, I mean, some distilleries have been making whiskey for over 100 years and then have started making gin. I mean, Bruichladdich, for example. What I was going to say was, we started from scratch. Now, when I left Glen Grant, Dennis had been there. He started in 1961. And Dennis's dad worked at Glen Grant, and Dennis's grandfather worked at Glen Grant. Dennis was, when he retired, he was the longest serving distiller in Scotland. Okay. So, that, and the other thing was the Russells. Like Jimmy Russell is the fourth generation.
Mm-hmm.
And Jimmy's now in his 90s, and I think it'd be 71, started making whiskey, Old Rippy. I think it was called Old Rippy then, before Wild Turkey, even became a brand. But at Isle of Harris, the team started from scratch. We had, I believe, a couple of consultants, including, Dr. Jim Swan, who is probably one of the most revered whiskey makers in Scotland. So, but it was, the keys were handed over when the parameters were set, and then it was basically people from the community. So Shona MacLeod, who's our blender, I mean, she came from the hospitality industry. Her family owned one of the two hotels on the island.
So who bankrolled you to get started? It sounds like it was a community effort.
So there were a number of investors, and then there was some, a small number of, I would say, micro investors. So the distillery was funded by, I think it was around about 10 or 13, round about there, investors that put money in. The founder was a gentleman from the south of England. And in the 60s, they bought an island close to Harris. It's a very small island. And that became where the kids went, for the summer. The family went for their summer retreat. So as the family kind of got older, they got to, what was going on. And the population was in fast decline. And so he put an ad into the FT, Financial Times, and looking for investors to invest in this island community, where they've been making Harris tweed for generations, Gaelic speaking, beautiful beaches, and there was a lady on a beach, I think in Spain. Her name was Eva, and she was Dutch, and she came from a printing house from Amsterdam. And she thought this was a worthy investment. And so she put some money in. And then there's people who this idea, this community project, and that's what got us to where we are now. In fact, our spirit still has a little plaque that says Eva, and that was the name of the Dutch lady who was the first, I think, the first to put some money in. Yeah, yeah, it's very cool.
Yeah, so it wasn't just internal investors. As a matter of fact, it was mostly external investors, but they were investing in the island. They weren't. It wasn't specifically the gin or the whiskey, because that didn't even exist. They just said,
No, I
we
mean,
know we need to invest in this
yeah.
community.
So
That's pretty amazing.
yeah, and there's another. I think there was a bit of luck as well, because there's a little ferry terminal at Tarbert. Tarbert's the capital of the island. Population 500. I mean, it's teeny weeny.
Yeah.
And well, the Scottish government had actually reclaimed some of the land in the harbour, just in front when the ferry comes in, right in front. And God knows what happened. I think there was some, the government put money in, and whatever it was for, the other partner pulled money out, and it was, well, the job had been done. There was land that was reclaimed, which was, we got permission to build the distillery, from scratch. So we didn't buy a distillery. In fact, we're the first licensed distillery on Harris.
Wow.
And when I say licensed distillery, and that doesn't mean that there was no other people making, moonshine.
We know.
Yeah. So I mean, and that was very common, actually. Bootlegging on the islands and parts of Scotland. The redcoats would struggle to capture all these moonshiners.
There's always somebody with a whiskey up in a cave.
Yes. Well, it's interesting, the story of whiskey. I mean, again, it goes back to the Middle East. In fact, the Arabs made alcohol. Ancient Mesopotamians, I mean, but they would distill alcohol. Alcohol is actually an Arabic word, alembic. But they would distill to make alcohol, medicinal purposes, preservation of food. I mean, to survive in, extreme conditions, but the Celtic monks who would go to, and you talk about 2,000 years ago, they would go over there and they would learn from the Arabs, people of the Middle East, how to distill, and they brought it back to Ireland, and then it spread over to Scotland. And these ancient abbeys, monks would, they'd be devoted to God, but the church didn't pay them. They would have to somehow eke out a living, and so they would distill and they would make Wishkaba. Wishkaba is Gaelic for water of life. Aquavitae in French. Eau de vie in French, aquavitae Latin. So Wishka, evolved into whiskey. But the monks would actually imbibe, and when they would imbibe, they obviously they got drunk, and they'd feel closer to God. So it became a ritual. It became a way of life, and then of course the farmers who were selling the crop to the monks and buying back the wishkaba, then they realized that they could do that themselves. So then it goes into the public domain.
Yeah,
So,
I mean, I honestly, I love the story of how your distillery got started. I feel like, I don't know, maybe that's on your website somewhere, but I don't see it. It doesn't glare out at me, and I just think that's a terrific story. That should
Yeah,
be
if you go
small.
to the website, it should tell you. It might
Oh.
not tell you the sort of. It will probably be more about the community and
Yeah.
the process. When you go to the distilleries, that's where you get these little stories that, might not be sort of shouting in your face on the website.
Yeah. Well, like I said, I'm kind of looking around for it and I
Yeah.
don't see it. It's not super clear, but I just love that, that's how you got started and
Yeah, I
that
mean
you're still
the
still going.
packaging and the packaging is, I mean, the investment in the packaging. I mean, you've got to say that, this packaging. I mean, when the design company, if you go into Google and and put an Isle of Harris and you'll see the beaches, but they've really done a great job on the gin and really nailing the landscape,
waves.
the
Yeah.
coastal, part of the island, that
Yeah.
topaz color, the ripples of the glass. I mean, it's very, very tactile as well.
Yeah.
It's a quite heavy bottle. It's definitely one of those mass-produced brands that, most whiskey in Scotland and gin and vodka is bottled right down here between Edinburgh and Glasgow. Okay.
Mhm. Yeah.
And it will be put into a big tanker that goes down one of these we have very small freeways in Scotland, and these big trucks put a lot of, wear and tear on our roads, but they'll go to pretty much an anonymous business park where there'll be a big modern building where there'll be pretty much automated high-speed production lines where you might get one or two operators, but they'll be like this. They'll be on a gantry on a screen troubleshooting. Oh, there's a little problem in line 2. The labeling machine is like, so they'll send some. Whereas when we're bottling this, it's there's about 22 people who's on the filling machine filling. There'll be someone putting the caps on, someone applying the strip stamps. There'll be someone lining the label it, applying the label. I mean, opening up the flat packs, putting the dividers in, building the pallets. I mean, they'll be chatting away in English or Gaelic. I mean, and some of the people are real. I mean, on an island that size, there's no one really has full-time jobs. So when I was there, the health and safety guy, Stevie, he was the health and safety manager, but he was also a weaver. And he also drove a community bus around the island. So I think he had 3 jobs. One age who was, when I was there, she's also a weaver. Some will own crofts. There's a lady whose husband is a potter. We do it every year. That we do what we call a Cayley bottle, which is a half-size bottle of this, but it's not. It's made of pottery, on a wheel, and the potter will do different colors. So this year was pink. Last year it was kind of a mauve. The year before it was a yellow. The next one's going to be green. So it's just such a rich kind of culture. Like the churches there, the religion is the Free Church of Scotland, and they're very strict. On the Sabbath, you cannot work. And the churches, there's no organs, there's no, imagery, there's no statues, but you can sing, and they sing in Gaelic. And I walked past one of the churches, and they were actually having choir practice that day, and and they were singing these Gaelic songs, and it sounded like the bagpipes.
Wow.
It was pretty amazing. I mean, it's a very, very special place,
And we can take tours if we ever get ourselves there, or no.
Yeah, I mean, the best way to do it would be, if you're, I mean, you have to plan to go there. It's not
Yeah.
get on the plane and you arrive there. So, best actually conduit, locature would be through me, and I'll put my. Wait a minute. That's my sort of social media handle. And you can DM me if you're going over. I mean, best is plan it, because you would probably fly into Glasgow. If you're on the East Coast, you can fly from Jersey. You can fly from, in fact, you can fly from LA, San Francisco, through Chicago, into Glasgow, and then you would probably rent a car at Glasgow Airport and then drive up onto the ferry. You have to book the ferries and stuff. So it's a little bit complicated, but I mean, when you're there, it's pretty special.
That's cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I mean, it actually sounds like a really an adventure just to get there, and then to be there feels like it'd be a really warm hug to be there in that community.
It is. It is. You got these incredible sheep that have got these curly horns, and very narrow roads. You don't have lanes.
Yeah.
There's just one lane.
Yeah.
And you're often, stopping. There's a cow, a couple of sheep in the way. Sometimes you have to honk your horn, and the cow will reluctantly get up and move off. You'll also get oncoming traffic that, you think, how the hell is he going to get past me? This is such a narrow road, but sometimes you have to put your car in reverse, and you have these tiny wee like a half a car lay-by, and you just squeeze through. So it's fascinating.
Yeah, sounds great.
Driving I did was between two hedgerows with cars coming in the other direction, driving on the wrong side of the road.
Yeah.
It's quite the challenge.
Yeah. And then probably most likely you'll get a stick shift.
Yeah.
Which is actually the best type of car to, navigate these little windy roads,
Super awesome.
Yeah. Robin, thank you so much. This has been just a terrific night.
Yeah, no, it's been fun. Thank you.
Thank you, Robin. I was going to say, I want to be respectful of your time, and it's getting towards 9:30. So thank you so much for all the knowledge and these wonderful whiskeys, and making sure that we got to try the gin and the Golden Globe. That was super special.
Awesome. Well, let me know if you need anything. I'm on Instagram, Facebook, and this whiskey family is broad and very interesting people, and that's what's so great about these kind of things. We get to
true.
Engage with each other.
You're gonna
and see old friends. Meet new friends and see old friends.
Exactly. That's the best part.
This year?
What was that, Golan?
You're going to be in Fox City this year?
Yes. I just signed up.
I just watched the Instagram, and that's the last reel that you have is from Fox City.
Are you going to go
there? And Bino, and
are you going to Fox City?
I see in your Instagram, when you watch the last videos that you have from last year, Fox City, you see Anna that was here at she was with Westland until not too long ago.
But are you going to Fox City yourself?
I'm coming up this year, yeah.
Well, I'll see you there, mate.
I'll see you then, unless you come into LA before.
I'm going to Palm Springs on Saturday morning for the Palm Springs Food and Wine Festival.
It's
gonna
far.
be hot.
It's gonna be like being on the dark side of the sun. Holy cow!
It's 97 in LA.
It was 100 degrees here today. I can't imagine Palm Springs. Holy cow.
You know, I signed up for because we did some event there, and then the retailer that was there invited us to go. Well, me. So I said yes. And so now I've got to go. You know, I'm like,
Just pack a brolly.
like us Scots were like, we're like bottles of milk. You know, when
So I mean, pack a brolly so you can hide under it.
they better put me where it's shaded or.
Yeah.
Well, listen, guys, thank you very much, and
Thank you, Robin.
awesome.
Thank you.
Certainly appreciate
Thank
all
you.
your time and knowledge.
It's very, very welcome.
Thank you.
Take care.
Good night.
Good night.